Well, I would suggest that we start and let people will join us. So good afternoon, my name is Arno Thyssen. I'm very happy to moderate this session. I'm director of European Business Summit, which is a platform active in Brussels, and our mission is to promote the cooperation and the debate between public and private sectors. We're focusing on several key industry sectors in Brussels: energy, digital, healthcare. But Ukraine is a key priority for us, and that's why, with the really appreciated support of the European Commission, we have created EU-Ukraine Business Summit in Brussels for the first time in April 24, and we'll organize it once again in April 25. So we're happy to invite you all to Brussels, and I believe this is an excellent complement to this conference. I would say I'm very impressed by the setting of this investment conference here in Warsaw. It's great to see this positive energy for Ukraine. For this conversation today, I'm very happy that we are joined by excellent panelists. First of all, Deputy Minister Sobolev. You represent the Ukrainian government and in charge of digital development, digitalization, and we know how the digital sector is an important one in Ukraine. We are joined as well by Gert-Jan Koopman. You're, of course, Director General of the European Commission in charge of neighborhood and enlargement. We had the pleasure to listen to your intervention already, Gert-Jan, and we know that your portfolio at the Commission is a huge one, and so we are very central in this conversation today. We are then joined by Mrs. Glaskova. You are CEO of the Union of Ukrainian Entrepreneurs, also a very central stakeholder for this conversation. So thank you so much for joining us today. Then we are joined by Pierre Elbron, so French Special Envoy for the reconstruction of Ukraine. So that we have also this national perspective. And we're also joined by the Italian Special Envoy, Davide La Cecilia. Thank you so much for joining us today. And then last, but certainly not least, we have Laurent Germain, the CEO of Aegis Group, the French and international group. You are a real entrepreneur, active in Ukraine for many years, and so we really look forward to your comments on these important thematics. Then looking at the audience, I'm very pleased to see a lot of business representatives in the room, which is great news, of course, for an investment conference. So I believe that the objective of this session is to clarify, to explain, to update, to try to answer to the question, was it for me as a potential investor at the end of this panel, at the end of this session, do I understand better the situation, and also am I more keen to invest in Ukraine or to do more trade between Ukraine and European Union. The theme of the session, it's a long title, I think, leveraging Ukraine's accession for economic recovery. I think we have here two elements. First, how to use the accession instrument the best way possible to promote the business environment, to push an investment agenda. So accession is a way to reach these objectives. And the other way around, to proceed to reforms, allowing for a more business-friendly environment, to make it more secure, more attractive, more trustful, is also the best way to facilitate a smooth accession process. So I would suggest that the first part of the conversation would focus on this new perspective, this new horizon for Ukraine to create a new legal, a new economic and business framework, sort of long-term perspective, why, what, when. And then on the second part, we can focus on the business reality, how to concretely push this short and mid-term perspective of investment agenda. We have 75 minutes to discuss all these issues, which is ambitious, and we'd like also to keep some time for the question from the audience. I would like to invite Deputy Minister Sobolev to share maybe your views on why do you think, even if it's a basic question, why do you think at this stage EU accession is so critical, and especially in this new geopolitical context that we see in preparation since maybe last Tuesday?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for being here in inviting us. Um, just last week we had a Kyiv International Economic Forum in Kyiv, and our minister was speaking there. And one of the main topics during the high-level panel was discussion about the drug report. So this is the report commissioned by Euro Commission, as I understand. There are discussions around it in EU and also in Ukraine. But how we read it and what we see in the three items that the Draghi report outlined, the like strategic autonomy of Europe in defense, then the additional innovation and the autonomy in the energy sector and the green transition, we think that Ukraine can play a big part. So basically, we can provide. We have like the most capable army in Europe as of now, and we have a lot of advanced military technologies and being tested right now on the battleground. And we have a lot of capacity in energy, and the energy system, regardless of the ongoing Russian shelling, is still sustainable, right? And we're gonna rebuild it, right? So why not rebuild it in the greener way to exactly help Europe faster achieve this green transition goal? And the third part of innovation. So everybody knows Ukraine IT and how innovative the country is. So this is just like some aspects of what we think Ukraine can bring to EU. But then for us, Ukraine, this is what our nation wants. Like we want to be a part of EU family. This war is partly about like our desire to become a member of EU. This just to recall that has all started during Euromaidan protests, right? So when the like previous government decided to abandon the EU track. So this is no way, like no other way that Ukraine is going to be as with EU. So EU integration is very important. And I think EU and Euro Commission and Gertjan and his team has been like really great supporter and help and like guiding us through this process to actually get into EU. And we have a really great Ukraine facility mechanism that that helps us, you know, not just kind of navigate this path, but also help to attract investment and rebuild in the way that that allows us to get into EU much faster. Thank you.
But maybe a second question on the digital sector, since you are in charge of this. To what extent could it serve as a central element of the reconstruction process? Some observers say that Ukraine could become a sort of digital model also for Europe or for the region. How do you see that?
No, like for one longer term and more strategic approach to that, we have together with also like EU and a lot of other partners, we have developed SME development strategy till 27. And one, like there are like 4 blocks. One of the block is this digitalization. So we think that like digitalization of our country allows us to be more resilient, more sustainable, allows like the businesses to operate easier. So digitalization of services, digitalizations of like different permits, it helps to fight like a lot of the corruption efforts, problems, because like it is so much transparent. And it's also another area that we're trying to do right now. It's going to create the most transparent recovery kind of in history. So like through digital means, right now you are able to understand which projects are on the priority with the government, which are funded by whom, how they tendered, etc. So this will allow this like really complex coordination of like half of the world or maybe more supports Ukraine and has some stake in the recovery to basically organize. And this is achieved by the digital tools.
To Gertjan Koopman, to elaborate an accession plan for a country which is at war, it's of course, I suppose, for your administration, a very specific experience, especially if we compare with previous accession program we have had in the past. The new geopolitical context, which is a bit in preparation, if you may say so, since last week, does it make it even more special?
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everyone. Arnaud, I think you are right that we are conducting accession negotiations in a context that, frankly speaking, is completely unique, unseen of. But what is interesting is that the essence of the accession talks is the same. It is about making sure that Ukraine takes over the EU's operating system, to put it in simple terms. And that doesn't change. It's just much harder to do it in a country at war, especially for the colleagues in Kiev. We're going at a fairly fast pace compared to accession talks elsewhere. But there are no shortcuts, and it will remain fully on merit. That's essential not just to make sure that our member states will eventually be comfortable with ensuring that Ukraine becomes a member of the family, but it's also essential for the investors here because from an economic perspective, the biggest offer that the accession talks hold is that Ukraine will be like an EU member state in terms of its markets, the rule of law, and how the systems function. And that's something on which we cannot give any discounts. We can't compromise. Now, that therefore means we have to work harder, faster, in much more difficult circumstances. That's really what makes it unique.
The process, could you share with us what's now the next steps in the roadmap and also the next challenges apart from this geopolitical order? Maybe again for the business people in the room.
Well, I think I would say two things. On the accession process, we're now in the process of what we call opening different clusters. So in other words, all of the stuff that needs to be done by Ukraine is organized in clusters. These cluster negotiations are opened, for which there are basic conditions that need to be fulfilled. The objective is to open as many clusters as possible next year, maybe all clusters. So that's one track. That's preparatory. But at the same time, on the ground, Ukraine needs to do the reforms that are necessary. And those reforms are what actually makes it attractive for investors to look at Ukraine. The other track, which we discussed this morning, and it's intimately linked, is the investment track under the Ukraine facility. And what we're doing there is, I think, pretty revolutionary. I'm using this word deliberately. We've actually, this morning, published a call for investors, allowing them to come up with their ideas as to investment projects they believe fit in with the Ukraine plan, which is really the growth strategy for Ukraine, that we will consider and work with them directly to make them ready for investment. Because we want the pipeline, as it is called, of investment projects to be speeded up so that we can use this big capacity of the Ukraine investment facility. Under this facility, we will have 40 billion euros of investments that can be facilitated. We can't wait until 27. We want that money to start flowing now. And that is why we're taking this unprecedented step. Thank you.
Mrs. Glaskova, so as I said, you represent Ukrainian entrepreneurs, which is a very key actor for this process. What do you say was the most important advantage you receive from the EU membership for your members?
Thank you so much. Good afternoon for everyone, and thank you for this opportunity to represent on this high-level discussion on this panel the voice of Ukrainian businesses. You know that the situation in Ukraine is currently challenging from different sides, military, economic, you know. I see in this, even in this hall, so many members of our organization and so many people from business community, and a lot of people come from Kiev, from different regions of Ukraine, sorry, not only from Kiev for sure. And they know how difficult now is operate in Ukraine. But anyway, Ukrainian business are still operating, paying taxes, saving working places, and thinking about they maybe not for the very big future, but for sure they're thinking about for tomorrow, not only for today's challenges. We faced as a business, faced so many challenges at the same time. Energy, security of the people, and for sure this new, maybe even unknown and not so clear, understandable challenges on this negotiation and upcoming EU membership of Ukraine. What it means? From the one side, on the other one hand, we have the good news that a lot of Ukrainian companies are now operating in European market. And they understand all the standards, rules, and they are open for new partnership and new collaboration and so on. At the same time, these companies even sometimes have forced to go to the new markets to help to save their businesses inside Ukraine. It's really important. It's not about running from Ukraine, it's about saving the businesses inside Ukraine. And another part of this situation in the business community is the SME, small, medium companies, even micro businesses. I suppose that even don't identify now how difficult it will be the part of this big European single market. What rules new, what new demands will they face? And we as a business community have to help them to understand it, to realize, to be prepared to operate on European market and to be the reliable partner for our foreign partnership. And of course, it's very important that understand that Ukraine now, I maybe say something from the government perspective, not from the business community, but it's really important. We have to understand, all of us, that Ukraine goes through this way to the European Union under the ongoing war. You mentioned that it's exceptional circumstances, and it's important to understand. We have to implement a huge number of reforms, and at the same time to think every minute about the security of the country and about our security, our territories. So it's a really complicated issue, really complicated question, but Ukrainian business, be sure they are ready to work on the transparent rules, the equal rules for all of them, and we are ready and happy to be on this process and to join as a business association on this negotiation process to take into account the voice of business because it's really important in this process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Pierre Elbron, so you're the French Special Envoy. How do you see the EU accession as a framework to drive Ukraine long-term growth? What is your view from France? We know that France has been a long supporter from Ukraine. So what is your views on that?
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation for this panel. Enlargement and obviously the process of accession is really key to anchor reforms in Ukraine. And I think, we've tried, and other world powers have tried different ways, replacing the institutions by themselves in a way which is quite intrusive. We have a model which is very much betting on homegrown institutions which are at the standards of more or less the European heritage built over the last decades. And I think this requires time and this requires effort. And obviously, I heard a lot that it's even more difficult in times of war. In a way, I wouldn't agree 100% because I saw Ukraine, and as you know, I've been very much involved on reforms in Ukraine for the last 10 years. And in fact, there has been, in a way, more reforms since the beginning of the war than in the decade before, even if a lot has been done before. Because also there is a sense that time is of essence, that the civil society also expects transparency much more than probably before, because this freedom is also fought on the front and with blood. And that it cannot be the same society as before. Hence also the fact that reconstruction is probably a misleading word because we're talking about transformation of the social fabric of a country. And this transformation has to be understood as a transformation of not only rules, regulations, which is of essence what the accession process is about, but also the the embedding of these values into daily practice of business, of civil servants, of politicians, of journalists. So it's a process which goes much beyond, a box-ticking exercise. I think, and that would be my last word, having spent a lot of time also in these discussions about the new methodology of enlargement, the positive and negative incentives along the process to get it right. I think we have the toolbox also to offer flexibility, smart solutions at the European level. It depends also on the capacity to have a balanced and discussions over the next months and years, because it will take some time, which obviously encourages everything we want and the Ukrainian society wants, and also be able to showcase to the business community, which is here, and the European one, which will be key, I think, for any future of the country, given its choice, its European choice, that things have changed over time, that practices have changed, and it's not only because of any pressure or on regulations to be changed that this is happening, but it's a free choice which is really embedded in the Ukrainian society.
Yeah, thank you very much, Pierre. We see it's a long and complex process, but what should Ukraine maybe prioritize, if it's in terms of sectors or in terms of reforms? What would be your view on that?
I think there has been a lot of debate at the European level of what matters really and what should be taken first. And this is very clear. It's what we call fundamentals. The rule of law, judiciary, how the public administration works. This is really key. And having tried to attract foreign direct investment in my previous job, which was vice president of EBRD, to Ukraine, I think beyond the security issues, which are very important, these elements are, in fact, in the priority list of expectations of businesses. The first one, and it happens that they are the first one which will be discussed next year also in the accession process.
Thank you very much. Davide La Sicilia, maybe the same question. So what is the Italian perspective towards this long-term process?
Good afternoon to everybody. Thank you very much for having me in this panel. First of all, I want to say that I need to apologize at a certain point. I need to run to another event. So sorry for not being able to take the questions later on. Before answering the question, I want to say that I share totally what Pierre said about the human dimension of the process that we are facing. We need to go a great deal in order to redress social wounds in Ukraine due to the war, due to this terrible conflict that is developing under our eyes, of which we are very close to see the 1,000th day in mid of November. The national perspective of Italy with regard to the enlargement of the European Union is that we are stronger supporter of this process. When Ukraine put its request for joining the European Union, Italy supported the request. We think that, as Gertian said, this is a process based on merit, but at the same time it has a strong geostrategic relevance. Foreign Minister Tajani says that this is a geostrategic investment, not only applied to Ukraine, by the way, but also to the Western Balkans. We had last June the Intergovernmental Conference that was a very positive step on the road to the Ukrainian integration into the European Union. Of course, this is only a first step. We need to proceed together. We count very much, by the way, on the Polish presidency in the next semester to give the enlargement a very strong boost. Enlargement will be, by the way, a part, the of the Ukraine Recovery Conference in July 2025. We decided to keep the 4 dimensions as in the Berlin conference. So one of these will be dedicated to the reforms necessary for Ukraine to join the European Union. The conference will be based on a main event, 4 thematic dimensions, the EU dimension, the human capital, the local dimension, and the business sector. And we see a very strong interaction between the EU dimension and the role of the private sector, because what we are doing in order to enhance the integration of Ukraine into the European Union will also reinforce the possibilities for the business sector to engage and participate in the recovery and the reconstruction of Ukraine.
Thank you very much, Davide. Laurent Germain, you are CEO of Aegis Group and also member of the Business Advisory Council of Ukraine Donor Platform. I would like us maybe to explain a bit what is your daily activity in Ukraine. You have been involved in Ukraine since 1993, so you have a very strong experience in the engineering sector. So we are really curious to hear about what is your experience in Ukraine.
So Aegis is the French leader for engineering and operations and maintenance for infrastructure. And Aegis has started its business activities in Ukraine in 1993, so 31 years ago. And we have 200 engineers still working on the ground in Ukraine. We still have a strong presence. I think we are the leading engineering companies in the Ukraine. We are working both on short-term projects in order to help Ukraine resist the attack, in doing engineering work on the destroyed infrastructure of Ukraine, bridges, any kind of infrastructure, energy infrastructure. But we are also working for the medium, I would say, term strategies of Ukraine and priorities of Ukraine, like transport and the national transport system, and concrete projects like the Kharkiv metro, for instance. So we are very proud of what we are doing in Ukraine, and we are the example of how a foreign company can be very successful on the Ukrainian market in times of peace or in times of war. I would also start saying that nobody has recalled or nobody has said that having Ukraine inside the European Union would be a fantastic asset for the private and public companies of the European Union. Why? Because Ukraine is the 5th largest population inside the European Union, so it would be a huge enlargement of the consumer markets of the European Union, almost 10% population more than the current population of the European Union. Second asset, and I'm not sure everybody knows it, Ukraine graduates every year 130,000 engineers. It's more than any other members of the European Union. And we are lacking a lot of engineers in the European Union for the infrastructure we need to deliver. So welcoming the Ukrainian engineers would be a fantastic asset for the European Union. So I think it's useful to say that having Ukraine inside the European Union for the private or public companies would be an asset. Then, for the private companies to continue to invest in Ukraine, what is needed? For a private company to invest money and to invest, I would say, manpower in a country, you need 4 things. The first thing you need is a market and financing. I think it is clear that the financing is there, and the financing will be there for the reconstruction of Ukraine. The second thing a private company needs is visibility on projects. Here, I think there are some improvements to be done. I know that the Ukrainian government is doing a lot on digitalization, but I think in terms of access of the information, in terms of prioritization of the project, still there are some improvements to be done, especially for the SMEs. For the companies like mine, already in Ukraine, we can find our way and we can find the information. For the SMEs, it's much more difficult. And Ukraine will need all, I would say, the expertise coming from big companies, but also from SMEs. The third thing that we need is clarity on the rules. And I guess sometimes it's not very clear who decides, the central government, the local government, So in terms of decision making, we need to be more clear about where the decision is taken. And then on procurement, and especially public procurement, I think Ukraine needs to get out of the lowest wins, because the lowest wins will bring them further from the quality required to adopt the standards of the European Union. And I think in the public procurement already, Ukraine should include in the criteria for the award the fact that the company bidding knows the standard of the European Union and will be ready, I would say, to help Ukraine adopt, I would say, the standards of the European Union. And the fourth condition is to have the ability to deliver. And my fear is that there will be billions of dollars of money spent, but there won't be enough, I would say, hands and brains on the ground in order to deliver them. That's why attracting companies now will be key to be at the pace of the flow of the money that will come.
Thank you very much, Laurent. Maybe from your perspective, would you say that European companies are then well positioned, let's say, to contribute to the reconstruction of Ukraine? Do they have a sort of advantage, knowing already the future standards and being part of the process?
Well, let's be honest. There will be a strong competition. You know, everywhere there is a market, you know, everybody goes where the money is or where the money flows. So competition will be fierce. I think the European companies have some advantages. First of all, their existing presence of Ukraine, and especially if I think of the French companies, we are the French, the greatest employer, foreign employer in the country. That means that a lot of the big French companies have a strong presence in Ukraine already. So that gives us, of course, an asset. Second of all, the European companies know the European standards a lot better than the American competitors. And so in the necessity for Ukraine to adopt the European standards, having, I would say, the European companies involved and chosen would be an advantage for them to be quicker in the transition towards the EU standards.
Thank you very much. First Deputy Prime Minister Sobolev, what are the steps this Ukrainian government is taking now to attract more businesses? So what kind of message would you deliver to the business community now?
Yeah, I think like originally I also come from the business sector, from the investment sector. So I understand what people would like to hear. Like business is very practical, right? So, but I think this panel highlights a lot of what businesses need to hear. So first of all, will the financing be there? Definitely. Will the support be there from the government, from our partners to businesses who operate in Ukraine now or kind of like after the war? Definitely. So there is no doubt about it. Like you shouldn't take my word for it. So there is a Ukraine facility that's being deployed on the ground. So as you've heard, the financing issue has, like we see it from the surveys of the businesses, where last year it was the high agenda. Now it's much lower. So basically the financing is there. Even like during the wartime, we very practical, like there's a call for proposals that your commission announced just today. There's going to be another signing of the war risk insurance instrument that we're launching. Another war risk insurance instrument will be launching by the end of the year or maybe in January. So there are practical steps that's going to help to reduce your risks. The other thing is that what businesses should understand, that just selling goods to Ukraine for recovery will not do. So I think both the policy of Ukrainian government and our partners is that we need to rebuild Ukraine. So Ukraine needs to be a member of EU, built into supply chains. What will work is setting up shops, setting up GVs with Ukrainian companies. This is exactly what I think a lot of the companies here are doing and why this conference is about. So the government and the partners will do everything we can to help do that. So what we have from the government, which instruments? We have industrial parks. There are a lot of industrial parks set up. We provide money from the budget for them to cover the expenditure on utilities. So basically, the government pays for utilities to connect to the industrial park, and then you build up with already some utilities existing. Then we have a mechanism for compensation of the large-scale investment. So we can compensate up to 30% of your capexes. This program has just been launched a couple of months ago. We paid several companies, and we look for the business applying. And then there are finances that come from the Ukraine facility. So a lot of the finances and grants, there'll be like private equity, new initiatives coming online next year. And also, as was mentioned, there is a visibility to what government thinks a priority is. So there's a list of like single project pipeline, we call it, a list of priority projects that you can find that you can work on together with the government, that we're going to be mobilizing the tools for that. And basically, what else? Yeah, probably the last bit that I'd like to mention is that it's either you who's be using these funds or your competitors. So I think and the last bit is that about the reforms. So there's no way we're not going to EU. I don't think that this is a matter of Ukraine's survival. So basically, whatever we need to do to have like the same rule of law, etc., it's going to be in Ukraine. You can look at how we execute Ukraine facility, this 50 billion agreement. So like we didn't miss a single indicator this year. Like the last quarter indicators are in the assessment with the Commission. I hope that there's going to be a positive assessment. So basically, you can look at the strategic documents, understand that Ukraine is delivering on them, understand the path forward, which is written in those documents, plan accordingly with you, and use the financial instruments that all our donors provide. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Gatian, maybe a question for you. I mean, so far, how would you say that Ukraine is attractive for European companies? And what would be your message also to European companies?
Well, my message to European companies is that they need to look at the long game here. I mean, Ukraine is on track to become a member state. As we have explained on this forum, there's going to be a lot of money and a lot of facilitation. Things were not perfect, let us be clear, a few years back, but as Pierre has also highlighted, there's been massive improvement. And the opportunity, the business opportunity, is enormous. There are significant risks, we all know that. This is a country at war. But there are also very high potential rewards. So I think we need to look at this as a strategic opportunity, not just for public sector investments, but as a private sector operator, going into a market that, if you look at the history of enlargement countries, is set to double over the next 2 years in terms of size. That is set to become an assembly place for a lot of manufacturing industries in the EU, a powerhouse when it comes to energy, and probably also an agricultural powerhouse when it comes to processed foods. You don't want to miss that opportunity. You will have to work hard, you'll have to take certain risks, but you will not be on your own. And I think if you don't do it, I like what Alexander just said, if you don't do it, someone else will do it. And let me be very clear, as a representative of the European Commission, we want our EU companies to do this. We are using our EU money, in principle, to fund European companies and associated companies. So we're also helping you in that regard. And what we certainly don't want is that this is going to be the work of Chinese and other companies from all over the globe, except from the countries to which Ukraine will actually belong as part of the European Union. That would be my central message.
That's a very clear message. Thank you very much for that. Mrs. Glaskova, what would be then your message, and also maybe some experiences of reforms or actions you have taken already in Ukraine to keep business going and to encourage then investment in Ukraine?
Okay, let me to add one more message to Mr. Koopman mentioned, because it's really important to understand to our foreign partners, potential partners, the time to invest in Ukraine is now, not tomorrow, now. Ukrainian companies, Ukrainian businesses which are still operating in Ukraine are not waiting for the finish of the war. Only our members of the Union of Ukrainian Entrepreneurs during these last 3 years under the war invest in Ukraine economy more than 600 million euros. For sure, it was sometimes there was investment forced to restore some damaged facilities or security issues. But at the same time, there was an investment in the new manufacturing, new products, launching new services, digitalization, or something like certification to be the part or reliable partner for European companies. So, and one more message to this, that it is important to hire Ukrainian people and to collaborate with Ukrainian companies. We have the brilliant people, brilliant businesses, small micro companies in different regions of Ukraine. And when you are thinking about some contracts, some rebuilding, big infrastructure contracts, you for sure need local expertise and local people. I understand that it's difficult sometimes to start to work in Ukraine. It's a new country. You know any people in Ukraine, you don't know how to start. So many expectations, money, funding, reforms, but how to start? What I have and want to say to you is that we could be, our organization and different other Ukrainian associations could be like could help you to make these bridges between European and Ukrainian companies, European and Ukrainian entrepreneurs. We could help you to find partner for you for starting to operate in Ukraine. As for regarding to your question about the reforms, we are really cooperate with our government, Minister of Economy, one of our big partner in our day-to-day discussion how to help business and what we could do for our government to help to identify the real needs of the companies, different sizes of companies, and to identify the priorities and to helping to keep eyes on the burning issues for businesses because, as I mentioned previously, challenges in Ukraine, it's not only about accessing process to EU, but we have a lot of challenging with people, lack of money, problem with energy and security, and so on. You understand? So in such very difficult circumstances, Ukrainian business really could be, could showcase this resilience and could be the example for you, for European countries. But for sure, I have to say it, and I want to say it, that the priority number one for us is winning the war. And we have to think about it with our international partners. We need your support because any investments want to come to country in such difficult circumstances. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Pierre, to what extent are French companies ready to invest? Have some visibility on that?
So French companies are already, as Laurent mentioned, the first foreign employers in Ukraine. So they employ more than 25,000 people and all stayed after the full-scale invasion. So it's always easy to say what will happen in the... We should start by the fact that we are not starting from a blank page. These companies are the ones, by the way, which are investing, have invested and will continue to invest. The last example being Saint-Gobain, for example, 2 weeks ago, which opened a new plant producing in Ukraine. Beyond that, I think there are good examples. There is one which is a very large investment, the largest investment not only in the last 2 years, but in the last 15 years, which is in the telecom sector, as you know, thanks also to the support of the European Commission, the BRD, the IFC, Xavier Niel, who has invested both in the fixed telecom network and in buying also LifeCell, which is the third mobile telecom network. It is a landmark transaction from a financial point of view, more than 1 billion of investment in Ukraine. This has been unheard of for many, many, many years. So it shows also that, there are entrepreneurs. Sometimes it's it's easier from not listed companies because there are less people asking, why do you put your money in Ukraine? But there are examples of people who have a vision, who know the potential of the country, who are able to take risk, obviously sometimes supported by concessional financing or guarantees, but who take the risk. And this is an example, by the way, we're talking about war risk insurance. This is an example of an entrepreneur not asking for any war risk insurance. So his equipment and assets can be destroyed. He is not covered, but he thinks that the upsides are much more important and that the potential of the market and commercial opportunities are there. This is one example, but I would just say, and for example, the presence of 50 companies here, but also this growing interest which we have to support from the European perspective, but also national and multilateral perspective, I think has huge potential, and we are seeing these signs of interest. The best, and that's why probably we, as French, have a special responsibility, the best ambassadors of Ukraine are generally companies which are already in Ukraine. And the fact that French companies are the first investors already in Ukraine obviously opens a room to convince others that they can support them, for example, in the banking services. Two of the five largest banks are French. And that is also a message of trust for the international business community and the European one.
Thank you very much. Davide, maybe the same question. We see Italian presence is real today here in the conference. What about Ukraine investment?
Well, first of all, let me say that there is a very strong attention from Italian companies, Italian business sector for the reconstruction of Ukraine. Witness the presence here today at this event, the main events that we are planning in the near future. There is going a business forum in Rome on 20th of November on a number of sectors such as metallurgy and critical materials, renewable energy, the defense industry, production machinery, the agribusiness, and also the made in Ukraine. There will be a specific session where made in Italy and made in Ukraine will match. We will support the made in Ukraine in order to promote this very strong capacity from Ukraine. I want to say that I see it like Gertian as a marathon, the rebuilding of Ukraine. This is something very long and something very important and consistent. The value of the reconstruction of Ukraine at the moment is 500 billion euro, and there is a new assessment coming out from the World Bank where this amount will be increased. Of course, this is very unfortunate, but at the same time it shows how big is the opportunity for international companies to participate in the reconstruction. When I was ambassador in Ukraine, I used to say that Ukraine was like a little China, rich in talent, in space, in resources, and really offers very strong opportunities. But we also say to our companies that they can start now. There are a number of things that can be done now. One is the rehabilitation of liberated areas, the demining, working for energy resilience, to reinforce energy resilience, the modernization of the western part of the country, the least affected by the war. Of course, we need to pay attention to the issues raised by the business. This is what we are going to do in the Ukraine Recovery Conference next year. We set up a number of consultation process with business constituencies. We set up a board with Italian business associations, which are represented today. We meet with 200 of them every month and a half. At the same time, we want to do this through manufacturing associations across Europe with partners within the Ukraine donor platform. We set up a business advisory council, which next year will be chaired by Italy, by the Vice President for Internationalization of Confindustria. They send us a number of recommendations, including concessional finance, as Pierre said, including war insurance, reduction of bureaucracy, liberalization, governance of the SOEs. We need to pay attention to all these issues because, as we said, the participation of business to the reconstruction of Ukraine is really key for our success.
Thank you very much. Maybe a question to Laurent Germain. Do you plan to continue expanding in Ukraine? What would be the conditions for that?
Yes, absolutely. We have a strong platform already in the country. We see a promising market in the future with the reconstruction. So for us, there is absolutely no reasons for us to reduce our presence to Ukraine, but reasons to increase. And by the way, before, I would say, the war, we were planning to expand. We were looking at some complementary investments. I'll give you some examples. Putting, some infrastructure into concessions, for example, airports. Companies like mine would have been a candidate to be the concessionaire of some of the airports of the country. So I think the Ukrainian government can send strong signals to the private sector if they decide to put, some roads or highways into concession. If they decide already to put some airports under concessions, they will send a signal that the perimeter accessible and the market addressable for the private companies will increase, and that will, of course, be attractive for foreign investments. So I think, and we see, if we take the example of Greece, the fact that they have enlarged significantly the management of their infrastructure to the private sector is probably one of the factors of its current success. So I think, the size of the private sector has to increase immediately in Ukraine, and the reduction, I would say, of the public sector.
Thank you very much. Before we conclude the session, I'd like to see now if we have some questions from the audience. I guess there is a microphone ready. If you can just introduce yourself, ask a question, and not doing a declaration. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for a very interesting discussion. My name is Norbert Rebo. I represent the American Chamber of Commerce to the European Union. Sorry, I would like to tease out a point that we have perhaps touched on in this discussion on the role of perhaps companies of parentage in allied countries who have experience in the EU regulatory market. How would, in the first instance, the Commission and the Member States see the role of such companies in the reconstruction effort and in the implementation of the Ukraine facility? Thank you.
It was difficult to listen. Can you maybe repeat the question with a bit more loudly?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Just on the role of companies with parentage and perhaps in allied countries, but who have a large kind of experience of working in the EU regulatory sphere, how would the panel see their role in the efforts on Ukraine recovery? Thank you.
Who would like to take the question?
Ukraine recovery is a global effort. So just, this, we just started a new edition of rapid damage needs assessment together with the World Bank. It's going to come on, be published the first quarter next year. So we're going to see this assessment around 500 billion. I don't know how much, but so no single region or block or country could solve that. And most of this money would come from private sector. So because there's not enough public funding. There are Russian assets, but still there are not enough, right? So there are 300 billion. They will eventually be in Ukraine, we're sure, which is it's a joint effort. So we're looking for partners from all continents. Of course, US is very important. I think it is becoming more important to have really strong business connections with the new administration, and this is what we're planning, what we're offering, right? So let's do let's rebuild together, and Ukraine could be really big player in the spheres that we discussed here in Europe, making like Europe more like economically independent from everyone, more secure. So both the Poland, like EU, UK, everyone. So, which is like we don't differentiate, and I think and this would be our kind of discussion with the US. So, like we're ready to cooperate, we're ready to offer what we have on the table, and like this PPPs and the mass privatization, we're definitely ready as the government to provide it to like different companies from US as well to work in Ukraine more.
Yeah, please, Gertian. Yeah.
I think this is a very good question, and I'm very glad that you know, you said it is a global effort. I mean, this cannot just be an effort for some countries or for the EU. It's the scale of the challenge is such that we need to mobilize the world. I would say that there are two European specificities. One is that Ukraine is a country on its way to EU membership. So when it comes to standards, when it comes to the rules of engagement, when it comes to eventually state aid rules, it's going to be the European regulatory framework that trumps, no pun intended. So that also means that other partners, companies will have to play by European rules. And I think it's important to be very clear about that from the start, because otherwise it will be difficult for them to operate in this context. Second point, when it comes to finance, you know, obviously we are giving a strong preference for European companies or Ukrainian incorporated subsidiaries of European or international companies in terms of our finance, as do other partners. That's only natural. Thank you.
Yeah, you wanted to react as well?
I think Gerd can very much touch upon the 2 points I wanted to make, but I would just, I think, want to emphasize that standards are very important, and I think it requires discipline from all the donors also to Ukraine, because the reform agenda of Ukraine cannot lead, because of pressures of some or others, to take regulation which will not be aligned with the EU rules and which would force more or less the Ukraine government and Ukrainian authorities to reopen things which have been adopted in the meantime. So it's very important also, and you know, American companies which I meet very much considered that their interests will be alignment and entry of Ukraine in the EU. So there should be consistency. If these companies and these countries want also a quick accession of Ukraine to the EU, we cannot lose time by adopting other standards and afterwards going back to European standard in 2 years or 5 years because it's a requirement. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is that Ukraine is on the European continent. We have obviously a shared interest in terms of ensuring the sovereignty of our continent. And this comes with responsibilities, for example, on security and defense issues, but also this comes with the idea that, you know, European taxpayers should be used according to these end values and these principles. And that goes back to also the financing, because it would be very paradoxical that the whole world is backed by European taxpayer money and free riding more or less on this generous support also to Ukraine competitiveness and future.
Thank you very much for your answers. Maybe another question from the room? Here, the gentleman in the center. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Thank you. Igor Olekhov, CMS Cameron McKenna International Law Company. Because we have a lot of representatives of EU in this panel, I was wondering maybe such a structural question. We see that actually EU is treating Ukraine within the framework of neighborhood policy, but at the same time in policy words saying that Ukraine is already member country, future member country. And my question is, when do you think Ukraine could become treated as structurally, not as a neighbor within neighborhood policy of EU, but as a potential member of the EU? And this would in practice mean that Ukraine become entitled to the funding from the EU budget based on the program as EU members, not as neighbors of EU. Thank you.
This is for Gertjan, accession process.
Well, let me be clear. Ukraine is a candidate country. It's not a country that is, in our neighborhood like Egypt or other countries with whom we work closely. It's a candidate country. There are 10 candidate countries. It's the candidate country that benefits from the largest envelope of any candidate country. It's a larger envelope than, I can't remember the exact number, but I think Ukraine is receiving more funds than most of our member states. We have a lot of small member states, but most of our member states. So very, very significant financial support, well in excess of 120 billion euros. And thirdly, in terms of organization, it's the only country in the world for which there is a dedicated structure in the Commission in the form of a directorate. So that's all very important. When will you go beyond that? Well, you will at some point become a member state, hopefully sooner rather than later, and then you'll be treated like a member state. But I think we need to do away with the misunderstanding that somehow Ukraine is not treated well in the current circumstances. I think Ukraine's position, both financially, organizationally, and in terms of political backing, is truly unique. And it will remain like that, and it is deservedly so. Thank you.
Thank you very much for clarification. Maybe a last question here. The left gentleman.
Hello, my name is George Petrivanoglu. I represent a green tech energy company from Greece called Unis. I know that in 2024 there were a lot of reforms in the energy policy in Ukraine, at least they were voted, and in order to align Ukraine's energy system with the European system. As a company, we intend to invest in Ukraine and develop projects and trade energy in Ukraine. And I would like a kind of an honest opinion, how ready is the country to receive this sort of investment, sign PPAs and those sort of things? Or you think this is too early?
Well, sorry, we have another energy kind of dedicated panel. I think it's better to address them. They're more in line. From what we know is that, yeah, Ukraine progressed a lot, and we can't do it alone. We do it with the Energy Community Secretariat, and they're praising all our reforms. From the part that we were responsible and working with Energy Community Secretariat, we developed National Energy and Climate Plan. This is a long-term strategy that models this green transition, and you could understand where the government will be pushing and making which policies, so you could plan ahead, like 10 years and ahead. And this is a part of EU integration document, so no way we're not delivering on that. So I think that's gonna help you from our side. I think at the end we're gonna do all the required reforms in the energy, however, whether the market is ready or not, it depends on your instruments. What I also can say that we're exploring the ways to decrease the risks for this offtake agreements. And maybe there'll be some facility specifically dedicated to the energy sector to decrease the risks of offtake agreements so you could have like longer 10, 20-year term contracts. We're looking into that. Thank you.
If we don't have any other question, maybe the lady there, we didn't have a lady yet.
Good afternoon. I hope it's possible to hear me well. So my name is Andriana. I'm from Caritas Ukraine. So we recently started very actively the direction of economic recovery and assisting micro businesses as well. So Mr. German, you mentioned the issue of visibility of MSMEs. So my question would be related to that. What are some pieces of advice, let's say, to businesses, especially small ones, micro businesses? What are your pieces of advice on how they can be more visible to you? So what should they do? What should they include in their strategy so that they can reach out to, first of all, state institutions, state representatives who could who could further link them with the EU representatives, and also what are some strategic advice also on how they can reach out to EU representatives directly, so to make them more attractive to you.
Maybe some elements of answers. I think, so digitalization, having on a single platform the entirety of the opportunities in terms of projects will be very useful. I know there is the DREAM platform, the ProZero platform, so some improvements have been done, but still I think we don't have the complete visibility of the number of projects, but not only the projects, but the schedule. Because of course the companies, they want to know if it's a project immediate, in 3 months, in 6 months, in 1 year. So this is what the SMEs are requiring, is to have, you know, the visibility on the projects concretely and the dates of, I would say, decision to assess whether they have a chance to prepare or if they don't have a chance. Then of course the SMEs, they need to rely on the big players, because I mean it's easier for an SME to be partnering with a larger company in a consortium, at least to start its business in Ukraine. And so I would really encourage the SMEs to get in contact with the existing larger companies in Ukraine in order to offer the services and be included in the consortium that will be I would say, put forward in order to answer to the biggest opportunities of the country.
Thank you very much, Laurent. I think we'll take your words as a sort of conclusion of this panel. So thank you very much to all of you for your input, for your commitment, also for your positivity. We feel enthusiasm, and I think the message were clearly delivered to the business audience and company that we need now to invest in Europe and support the country. So thank you very much to all of you for your presence today.